Welcome to Glow for Hope, sparking conversation on mental health, where we break the silence, build community, and ignite hope. We're here to talk about what really matters: mental health, wellness, and the conversations that help us all feel seen and supported. Every episode will bring real stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you navigate mental wellness and suicide prevention. Because together, we can change the conversation. Let's get started. Welcome to Glow for Hope, sparking conversation on mental health. I'm your host, Kelly Poelker. Every episode, we sit down with people who aren't afraid to have the conversations most of us avoid, because sometimes hearing someone else's story helps us better understand our own. Today's guest has spent years helping people navigate addiction, trauma, grief, and mental illness. He's a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, behavioral health leader, speaker, educator, and someone who has spent his career walking alongside people in some of life's darkest moments. But today isn't about Richard's credentials, it's about Richard's story. He's been open about his experiences with grief, PTSD, clinical depression, addiction, and what it means to continue doing the work of caring for your own mental health, even after spending years helping others care for theirs. Richard, thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
As we were emailing back and forth before today's conversation, one thing that kind of stuck with me is you wrote, "I've been taking care of people since I was 5 years old." How in the world can a 5-year-old take on so much responsibility? And at that age, were you really even aware of it, or did that become apparent later in life?
I would say that the awareness came much later in life. Um, it was just a product of circumstances where I was parentified at a young age because my father was an alcoholic and mentally ill. And because of his inconsistency in our family, it was just my mom. Most of the time, it was just my mom. And because he was inconsistent and couldn't hold a job a lot of the times or was, not present, she had to work. And a parent can't be in two places at one time. So with a younger sister, it just seemed to be the way that a lot of times some of that slack fell onto me. But no, I don't think I had that awareness then. And in all honesty, maybe until just a few years ago, I was really proud of the fact that, like, yeah, I'm that guy. Like, you just call upon me and I will come to your aid. And now I'm at a place in my healing journey where I'm like, let me check my schedule. Let me get back to you. Maybe not quite that stark, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, what about me?
So do you think like that's kind of where the clinician in you was born?
Yes. I
Yeah.
I am a person of faith. I am a Christian, and it is a huge part of my healing journey as well as my recovery walk, and even service in the community. But um, I'm not sure that that was ever the plan. Really, by design, was for me to be a professional counselor or a clinician or anything. I would argue that that is what I knew, and it made sense to me. I wanted to be a writer. That was the only thing I ever wanted to do, still do. And what transpires is that you can't just be a writer. You have to pay bills. That's the reality of life. And it's like, well, what are you going to do if you can't? You have to build that career. Well, how do you pay bills? And someone suggested, well, teach. That's usually the way you teach until you can do, or if you can't do, you teach. And so, oh, okay. And I remember early in my bachelor program, I was studying teaching, and that's what I thought I was going to do and build this writing career. And then they sent me to a local middle school here in town, and they broke me. They broke me quickly too. It took one day. I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm changing my major tomorrow. It was a whole ordeal. I didn't even think about high school or elementary or college or anything else. I was just like, no. So I switched that degree to English because it still studied the same subject that I was interested in, rather than just solely focusing on writing. And I added another bachelor degree in psychology because that's the only other thing that ever made sense to me was human behavior. And so I don't think that it was really, I would say, God's design in my life, maybe. But I would argue that a core identity of mine, which I believe comes from my creator, is that of a healer. And I don't think that they contrast at all. I think actually being a clinician limits what being a healer means. I think being a healer has a broader definition and it looks a lot of different ways. So, no, I don't know that that was ever the plan per se, but I think it was birthed out of a familiarity and just a trajectory of my life that I really wanted to understand why people do the things that they do. What is behind this? Even as a
Mm-hmm.
younger person, my dad would be in facilities at times where the only way to visit was you would have to do these family days. So for a youth, I would have to go to an Al-Anon meeting and some support groups and whatnot, and I hated it. I didn't like it because I felt like I wanted answers. What's wrong with my dad? Someone explain to me why my dad behaves the way that he does, or why can't he function correctly, or the way that it appears everyone else's parents do. At least at that time, that's how it felt.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more about, hey, this isn't your fault. So what I heard was, you're not a victim. I'm like, yeah, I know I'm not a victim. I want to know what's going on. And it was Al-Anon was not, or I'm sorry, Alateen was not in the wrong. They were really trying to make sure the kids understood they got support and love that they deserved. But for me, I didn't feel like I was getting those answers. So I remember at one of the facilities, they actually made some exceptions for me to be able to go to AA meetings with my dad. So for me, hearing the perspective of another alcoholic and the things they did, and maybe what was behind that, was more helpful in my relationship with my father and my journey of navigating like what addiction and mental health looks like, because I just had deeper questions than I felt like they were giving me at my age. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably age appropriate for everyone else. But again, if you start taking care of others around you at 5 years old, you, you're a little, you're in a different
Well,
headspace. So,
different perspective there. So looking back now, what do you understand about that young version of yourself that you couldn't have understood then?
oh man, I see now how the world changed that kid is one of the biggest things. A lot of the things that people that have grown up with me or known me in my life, how they may have experienced me or believe me to be, that was never me. Those are survivability characteristics. Those are maybe even pathology, some of them, but that kid was quirky and a nerd and innocent and small and curious, and so many things that the world really snuffed out. They just had no. They got you hurt. They got you. Um, it was a difficult way to be as a kid. So I learned to hide those parts of me, to abandon those parts of me, and really looking back, I think that's what I learned to do the best for many years, was to abandon myself. Um, Unfortunately, when you have abandonment wounds, you pick up the baton sometimes and you learn to abandon yourself and put everyone else ahead of you. And then you end up in romantic relationships or intimate relationships. It doesn't have to be romantic, but where well, if I do these things, they will love me and then give me back what I need. And that's not really how it works. So I would say those are real critical things, takeaway wise, looking back, that it was unfortunate. Um, mental health stole my entire life for the better part. It stole my childhood. It stole my adolescence. Um, I escaped in a lot of ways because of my education and training and a successful career, and I broke free of that, and due to circumstances and things that played out in my dad's life and in his mental health, that same issue, that same factor of mental health stole much of my young adult life. And I don't feel that it's stealing anything from me at this point, even with my awareness of, things that I carry.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's that, but it's taken a lifetime of getting there. And maybe even, again, just in the past few years of really prioritizing my own healing journey, my own self care. I often find myself telling people self care is not selfish. It's
Yep,
it's
that's
not.
very true.
It
We
you
we
you,
we
you
missed
deserve.
that part.
Yeah, Yeah,
And when helping people becomes part of who you are, it has to be hard to separate what you do from who you are.
that's right. I would
Yeah.
also argue that, I can't speak for others. I can only speak for, the circles that I belong to. But I think for men, especially our identities are all jacked up, and one of the reasons for that is we tend to see our careers or jobs as our identity, and that is
Mm.
not the same thing at all. Now, there are obviously certain truths, like if someone is a firefighter, okay, well, that's not their identity. That's still a career. Well, what do we think of about a firefighter? We think of bravery and courage and valor and things. Yeah, those probably are core attributes of their identity. And it makes sense that that career and that identity merge well. But does that mean someone that is a production worker at Ford assembly plant does like that's not their identity, but they may also be a dedicated and loyal husband and father, or wife and mother, or whatever. And it's like, okay, they get crossed sometimes, that identity in our career path. But yeah, especially in the helping field, I train counselors these days, um, and it's a really hard concept to teach them that it's okay to be a helper. It's a good thing, but we also have to check our motives, and we have to really try to filter, like, savior complexes and so many other things, boundary issues, and realize that it's not all on us. And it may not look the way that movies have portrayed it, or TV shows, or things like that. And one of the hardest things is, once someone's a client for me, that's the only capacity that our relationship can really be. And there are some exceptions in some situations where some years have passed, and a clinician and a former client, maybe that relationship alters or shifts. But for me, that's the hard line. So it's like, when you're in a helper role, it comes with certain responsibilities, but you also have to be able to differentiate, like, is this a real responsibility, or is this something I imagine that it's my responsibility? And
Mm-hmm.
it gets muddled quickly.
Yeah. Another thing that kind of struck me in your email was that despite all of your experience, there came a point where none of it seemed to matter. And
Yeah.
you said, all my training and knowledge meant nothing in that moment. Take us back to what that meant.
Yeah. So I mentioned escaping my childhood, escaping my family of origin, or whatever, however you like to characterize that. But um, I started college in high school. When I actually started college, I had about a year and a half, 2 years done already. So, I mean, I knew what I wanted to do. I was working on it from the jump, and I was good in school. I got all my attaboys and positive accolades from teachers, and what I wasn't getting at home, I sometimes got there. So I chased success. I chased achievement, and I thought those were the marks of success, and how you measured your wealth, so to speak. And much of my teenage years, I didn't really have much to do with my father, because uh, this good old friend of mine was introduced to me. Their name is Anger. And I finally just reached a point where I was tired of being a victim. You can't fool me if I don't let you in. You can't break promises if I don't let you in. I'm done. And a lot of those years were spent that way, standoffish and not wanting anything to do with them. And at the end of that, the reality was that my father was sober ish for the most part. His relapses would be pretty brief if he did relapse. The sober periods lasted longer. He was more consistently on medications that were successful. My father was schizophrenic and bipolar, and the medications that worked for him were older, so they had really stout side effects. He hated taking them, which is a fairly common thing with chronic mental health issues. Is just, if you don't like the way you feel, it's like, the medicine's making me sick. So
Mhm.
then it's like, well, I won't take today's. And then then, for him, if it was mania or whatever, he would elevate in mood. So to him, he felt better.
Right.
For me, it was like, here we go again. And I just got really of tired of falling into that cycle until I had a kid on the way, until my first child was on the way, and I just realized I just don't know what I think I know about life. And from that moment, he was very excited when he found out he was going to be a grandfather, and there was something about seeing that grin on his face that shifted something in my heart. Um, and we didn't really go backwards. We didn't even have conversations about the prior, previous chapters in this journey together. We just moved forward, and my dad was my best friend. I finally had the father I always wanted. We did everything together. I grew up in a family of deer hunters, so whether it was deer hunting or sport, watching University of Louisville sports. um, he was on disability, so he also called me 133 times a day, sometimes every 5 minutes. Like, what are you doing now? And I'm like, same thing I was 5 minutes ago when you called. I'm working. What are you doing? Um, and for 6 years, that was the journey, that was the story, and it was awesome. And in 2006, and in February of 2006, I was um, finishing my. I'm sorry. In February, my marriage was coming to an end. I had two children in the wake of that, so that was it was just my whole life was upended by that. Um, I went from seeing my sons every day to seeing them every other weekend, just because they were young, and in the state that I live in, at least at that time, custody was not a 50-50 thing. It was very lopsided with mothers most of the time. And in May of that year, I was finishing my master's degree, starting towards my PsyD in clinical psychology, and got waitlisted to start that program, and thought, man, this is the end. My life's over. I'm getting divorced. My identity as a student and all this is up in the air. And, comparatively, those things were nothing in the grand scheme of things, because in November of that year, November 12th of 2006, my father made the decision to shoot and kill himself during a hunting trip. And it fundamentally changed my life forever. The person that existed on November 11th ceased to exist. And I know that that's not 100% accurate. That obviously there are core components to who I am that are still there, but
Right.
pieces of me died, and I say it that way to be true to my healing journey, because I wasted many years in my grief and inability to deal with my grief trying to get back to who I was before. And that's an impossibility, because grief is a formidable opponent. It demands to be honored and heard, and it is so counterintuitive. We don't want to hurt. We don't want to be sad. It nothing's going to bring them back, and we're tired of thinking about it and feeling it. And who wants to be miserable? And the sheer trauma of it all was another layer to it. And um, for me, here I was, this young, successful psychologist. I was the director of a correctional facility. I had everything going for me in my eyes and was just on top of the world. But again, a lot of that was built on a facade and these accolades and awards. And I thought that's really what was measuring my success in life. And then things that really mattered, like my family, my sons, my father, were compromised or lost. And you can only work so many hours. You can only pour
Hear
yourself
that.
into your career. At some point, you gotta go.
Hmm.
And
And success is such a personal thing.
it
It's,
very
people
much.
are always like, what do you, how do you know when you've achieved success or this or that around success? It's like, somebody else talks about how
Yeah,
successful they are, but okay, well, it can be something completely different to me, what I have achieved. It's not how much money I have in the bank or, how many letters I have after my name
yeah,
and degrees and so forth. It's very personal, and you can define your own success. It doesn't have to be based on what other people see it as.
yeah. You are absolutely right. And I think another piece of that as I thought through that really stung was, ironically, the one person that always knew what to say to me was my father. of all the people, my grandfather was my father figures. That's primarily who filled that role as a child and teenager and young adult. Um, but it was my dad. I remember one time I was just really feeling low about something, and he was like, "You got nothing to hang your head out about. You've accomplished more at 26 years old than I've accomplished in my whole life. Look at what you've done, and look at me."
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard those words, it was like, it's my father telling me he's proud of me, that I've surpassed him. I fancy that in a teacher, mentor, disciple type of a role, that the moment you think you know everything and you're done learning, you're in trouble. In theory, your children should surpass you at some point. Your students should surpass you, because if you give them everything you've got and then they bring their own experiences, you really equip them for something greater than you were even capable of. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I heard from those messages, or when he was able to kind of talk me off the ledge, so to speak. But without him, and not being able to see my sons as often as I would like, and you can only work so many hours, and um, managing the symptoms and coping with PTSD, I became a serial dater, and just chasing women and alcohol. And then eventually, I had been on pain medication for 5 or 6 years for herniated discs in my back. At 21 years old, they just put me straight on 30 milligrams of hydrocodone a day.
Holy
Do
cow.
do not pass go, do not collect $200, just right out the gate. And I took them as prescribed all that time. Why wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Enter grief, enter trauma, enter this void inside of me. I was looking for something to fill that hole in my heart, the shape of my father. And my story is really no different than the people I worked with at that time and work with again. And still, um, the saying is that, one's too many and a thousand's never enough. And I started to abuse that pain medication, and ultimately destroyed that career as a psychologist. Just ruined it.
Do you
And
feel
that
like
was
he
it.
kind of became your dad for a while?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Probably worse in some ways, because he never went to prison. That's where my story goes. I was the director of a correctional facility, and I didn't just lose that career. I used those credit cards inappropriately. I got pulled over with a bunch of pills on me. And at the end of that fight and ugly chapter in my life, I had to go to prison. And that's a really big conversation on itself, which is fair game. But it took almost 2 years to get to the culmination of those charges and what was going to happen. And um, going there, I felt it was just the exclamation point on my life. It's over. I'm my life is over. This is my life from now on. Apparently, no one's ever going to hire me again. I'll probably never see my sons again. That gave my ex-wife ammunition to not let them talk to me, and through the courts. And
Did you
so
have anybody on your side at that
I
time?
did. I
Okay.
did. And I will argue and will always argue that support is a large part of how you're going to get through any of these matters in life, whether it's addiction, mental health, just grief, any trauma, any of it. This is not a team, or I'm sorry, not an individual sport. Life is a team sport. The problem is sometimes we don't have support. So then we have to figure out, like, well, how do you build a support network if you don't have anyone or have healthy people? And I think there's some tangible ways to do that. In my case, I had my mother, and I had a small handful of friends and family that didn't give up on me, and they corresponded. We wrote letters, and that's really what kept me alive, so to speak. Waiting on the mail to get there, timing. If I mail it on this day, it'll get here on this day. And it kept me connected to the outside world. But I also was able to speak on the phone with my mother. And she was the only person I could talk to on the phone for the better part. It's expensive to make those kinds of phone calls. And she played a big role in what happened while I was incarcerated and arguably the rest of my story. But I want to go back to all that training and education amounting to nothing.
Mhm.
Isn't that how it goes? Sometimes we miss the tree because of the forest. Like it's one thing to advise someone else what to do in their life, but when it's your life, it's sometimes just it's different. And
Yeah.
I I was just trying to outrun my grief. I was tired of not sleeping. I was tired of nightmares. I was tired of not feeling good. And that first extra pain pill I took, I felt something. I felt good. I had fun. And I was like, oh, I found it. I have that thing that's been missing. And if I just do this every day, I'll be okay. And it was a lie, obviously. But I fast forward to being incarcerated, and that's where faith enters my life. I grew up in a Catholic church. I went to a Catholic grade school, but I never knew Jesus. I don't believe that I had the. It was hard to wrestle with faith in that context because my childhood looked different than other kids around me. So I was constantly asking, well, if there's a God, why do I have to keep going through these things? Why does my dad keep trying to kill himself? Why does my dad not quit drinking even though he promises me he will? Why did my dad hurt my mom? Why did he choke me? Why did this happen? Where's God in all this? And a lot of times, people with faith oversimplify things for people and just say, God's mysterious and all things that are non-answers and don't do anything for those that are going through stuff.
Mhm.
And for a kid, the concept of at least I'll speak for my own faith, Christianity, but it's like, what do you mean he's three people all in one? That's kind of weird. I don't understand that. But when the adult in that conversation goes, this is just what we believe. That's not how faith works. That's not how believing in anything works. I got to wrestle with this. And when you're telling me I can't wrestle with it, I just have to believe it. That's hard. That's a hard pill to swallow. So I just never, I didn't have real faith. And then when my dad died, and I finally had that dad I always needed and wanted in my life, it was, do you remember Forrest Gump?
Mhm.
Do you remember the scene in the crow's net on the boat, on the shrimp boat? Lieutenant Dan was drunk up in the bird's nest or whatever they call it, crow's nest,
Uh-huh.
screaming and cussing God. I had many a nights like that where I dare God to reveal himself. You owe me. You owe me. I want an explanation. If he'd have died 7 years earlier, I don't know that I'd have even cried. I was that closed off and I had just accepted this is what it is. So what was the point of this? God, if you're real, you owe me an explanation. And here's what happened. I don't feel like I heard anything. I don't feel like I got that answer. So that told me one of two things. Either you're not real or you don't love me. And either one of those fits the narrative I've been hearing my whole life, the way I've felt.
Mhm.
And I just decided there must not be anything other than this life. And I lived in my skin, so to speak, in my flesh, um, until I was forced to go sit down and there was nothing but my thoughts and feelings to wrestle with. And when I got to jail and was being processed, um, I was speaking to my mother on the phone, and she said, "You need to pray." And I remember telling her, "I don't know how. I don't want to hear that mess. I don't know how. I know a bunch of prayers. They're just song lyrics. They don't mean anything to me." And a few days later, I know it was sometime inside 7 days because I was only there 7 days, and I was telling jokes with a guy next to me, and they were probably very colorful jokes, and we were just killing time together. And an officer came through and hollered church. And he got up and I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Church." And I was like, "For what?" Like, we're over telling centerfold jokes or something. Like, what?
Mhm.
He said, "We got nothing better to do." That's true.
Valid point.
That is the only reason I went. And for a little while, all I could think about was how dangerous this situation was. I used to work in this field. There's
Mhm.
one officer. I worked in two of our state prisons doing psychological assessments and therapy with offenders. So there's one officer a pastor who's a volunteer from a local church, and 40 inmates, and I'm looking around this room going, this isn't safe. What if they try something? What do I do? Do I get involved? Do I find a corner? Like these are the thoughts going through my mind instead of going in there to hear God's word, right? I went because I had nothing better to do. And I just realized that at one point I honed in on this gentleman, and he said, "This is how you pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." He was in Matthew 6. And I was like, that's weird. My mother was just telling me to pray. And I come in here and this guy is reading the Lord's Prayer. And what clicked for me was that I've read the Bible six and a half times in my life at this point, and I didn't realize that the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, came out of Scripture, out of in particularly Matthew 6. And I'm like, huh, no magic moment, got shipped, get somewhere else, and I was really struggling to accept that this was my doing. This was everybody's fault but mine. It was my ex-wife's fault, my dad's fault, my mom's fault, my lawyer's fault, the judge's fault, the detective's fault, probably people I've never even met's fault. Like I blamed everybody but myself. And when I got there, it was not a pleasant place, and there was a lot of there were safety concerns, all kinds of stuff going on. And as I'm talking to my mother, she's again still trying to minister to me, and I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Where's God at? Where is he? I need him right now. Where's he at? Well, here's the thing. And not to shift this entirely towards faith, but it is a large part of how I have come to find long-term healing in my own recovery journey and with my own mental health. Um, God's not some kid with an ant, with a magnifying glass doing things to us. We live in a really messed up, broken world. We just do. God doesn't give people cancer. The food we eat does. The contaminants in the air and water do. The sentiment is, where is God in that and in people suffering? But like when you're suffering, it's really hard to see anything other than, if you're real, you're doing this to me. Why? Well, I still felt that way. And I remember one morning, I'd been going to the AA meetings at this facility, and a local pastor is who came in and facilitated that. He keeps inviting me to church, and I'm like, that's not my thing. He's like, you really seem to understand this recovery stuff a lot. What do you used to do for a living? And I'm like, I can't talk about that in here. I would get hurt. It would have been a safety issue, knowing that I worked in corrections, or what. I guess I
I
could
was
have just
wondering
said,
that myself.
maybe counselor or something. But even then, like, so I remember, I think I told him, like, I work at Ford or something like that. Like, I make cars. Like, let's just leave it at that, buddy. And he knew I was not telling the truth, but he accepted it. You should come to church. That's not my thing. Appreciate the offer. I'm not doing it. But I've always gotten up early. And there was a particular morning that I was awake pretty early in my pod, and no one else was up. And I was sitting on a concrete floor speaking to my mom on the phone, and I was like, this is all my fault. I did every bit of this. And she said, Richard, you're going to have to forgive yourself. And I told her, how? How do you possibly forgive yourself for messing your life up this bad? The fall that I have experienced, there's no getting old. There's no fixing this, Mom. What do you mean forgive me? How do I forgive myself when I haven't spoke to my sons in 2 years? They're boys. At this point, they would have been about, let's see, it was 6. This would have been 2012. 10 to 12, I didn't talk to them. So they were just youngsters, 8 and um, 5 or something. And so the they may never speak to me again, Mom. How do I forgive myself for that? You're gonna have to take.
What?
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
I just told her. I said, how do I forgive myself? She said, you're gonna have to take that to God. I'm tired of hearing this. And I finally ended up going to church because I was tired. My grandfather was sick and dying. he had a valve replacement and it was having issues, and he was had a surgery coming up, and I'm here. He's been there for everything in my life, and so now I'm carrying so much shame because now I'm admitting this is all my fault, and he's gonna die, and I'm not gonna be there. He's probably scared. I can't be there for him. Everyone's gonna know I'm not at the funeral, and just all that was on me. And I went to church. This is
I mean, before you get into
oh,
that, what was that kind of epiphany that you had that you finally started to accept responsibility for what had gone wrong?
I think it was a combination of, like I said, I was going to AA meetings there. And
Hmm.
like he said, I really grasped it. I was 22 months sober when I was sentenced to prison. I wasn't really healing. I was just kind of what we would call dry sober. I was just abstinent, but it starts there. I don't care how long. You
Hmm.
got to stop using, really. Well, I think it was a combination of that and then being engaged in these AA meetings and these other men. My story has worth. My struggles and knowledge have worth in that room. It was one of the things when I was going to AA meetings or NA meetings on the street that I experienced where, like, any day of the week, any hour, there's a meeting available. I can go in there and share anything, and no one's going to judge me and go, "You did what? What did you do?" Because
Hmm.
guess what? They've either done it themselves or done worse. And then sometimes you don't have the energy to speak or share, and someone else shares something, and you're like, that really normalized my life. So that fellowship and support system of 12-step groups is really so powerful. And I think that participating in that weekly and engaging in these conversations, I think I really remember feeling like this pastor leaned on me a little bit to help mentor some of these other guys in this pod or from the other cells or whatever.
Hmm.
So I think it was a combination of that, my mother ministering and praying over my situation, um, and writing and processing while I was there, and really having to sit with my emotions. I think is what. Oh, I can't outrun this right now. I have to acknowledge that the chickens have hatched. They're
Yeah.
my baby. I did this. Oh boy.
So,
So
so being a mental health professional as you were before you kind of got to that point, you were dealing with all the the grief and depression and stuff. I mean, was it just hard for you to admit it for yourself that you were kind of spiraling and needed help before it got out of control?
so at first it was not. I knew I was not well, and I couldn't regulate my emotions. I wasn't crying productively. Tears would just stream down my face. And I mean, I would just be talking to somebody, and they're like, well, "Are you okay?" And it's like, I don't even know how to answer that, man. Like, it has nothing to do with this. I'm like, this is just me right now. Couldn't sleep, nightmares, all that. And, this isn't, I really don't mean to attack anybody, but I think it is super important to cover what grief and support during someone's grief looks like and shouldn't look like. But immediately you're thrust into funeral planning. So the
Mhm.
day after my father's death, we're going to the funeral home. And I remember my mother, "Hey, what do you think of this? What about this song? What about this?" And it was like, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't care. Okay. I don't know." That's just where I was. And I remember her kind of just snapping and saying, like, "You're going to have to go to your doctor and get on some medicine because I can't worry about you and handle all this." And that's okay. So I went to my doctor that afternoon, and they put me on Valium for a little while before they started me on the antidepressants for 16 years or whatever it was. So it was like, oh, so there's something wrong with me. I need to go take a pill for that. I'm broke. I'm deficient, or I'm broken. So it was like, oh, and I knew I wasn't okay. So it was like, fast forward several weeks, I don't know, but I was dating someone, and I guess my crying was disturbing them, and they slammed their fist down and they were like, "Oh my God, would you stop already?
Oh, wow.
Everybody loses their parent. You need to get over it." And while that might be true that everyone loses their parent, I don't think everyone experiences what I did. And so what? I
Yeah.
lost my father. You can't rank suffering. So sometimes people are like, well, the only person I've lost is my grandmother. And it's like, yeah, hold on, stop. Don't qualify your loss. That might have been
Hmm.
the healthiest person in your life. Maybe that was your motherly figure in your life, or maybe that was the only like, don't. disqualify your suffering. Like you can't rank it. I think the only thing that people would kind of agree is that burying a child is the unthinkable loss, and that just shouldn't happen. It goes against the natural order of things. Whether you have faith or just don't believe in God, it doesn't matter. It's not biologically how this should go.
Right.
But outside that, people, we can really be insensitive to one another's grief, and I think it's because we are afraid of grief. It's a taboo subject, and in Western culture primarily. So. Um, I got into therapy. I got back into therapy. I spent a lot of my life in therapy, but I had been out of therapy for a long time. Life was good. And I knew, okay, I need to go deal with this. And the reason I went back to therapy is I was struggling with guilt. And it was not just normal guilt. I felt guilty that I felt relief that he was dead.
Mhm.
And I wasn't able to acknowledge that in the beginning to anyone other than my therapist, but there was just like, okay, it's over. It's finally over because I watched him do it 100 times.
Yeah.
I waited in those lobbies and waiting rooms. Every nurse or doctor that walks by and makes eye contact, you just know from the TV shows they're going to walk over and give you that spiel that they tried everything, and then he would pull through and he would pull. And I remember like, God, why don't you just take him? If Why would you put us through this? So when it was final, I remember being like, isn't this what you wanted? Of course not.
Right.
So I was really conflicted. It didn't take me but a few months to work through that false guilt, so to speak, and then I stopped going. I had not dealt with the trauma. I had not dealt with the loss. I was like, oh yeah, this isn't my fault. I didn't want this to happen. Well, that was really not that difficult to work through. Um, so I jumped out prematurely. I was not practicing what I would preach to somebody else, so to speak. And that's really where I got myself in trouble, because it's like holding on to an electric fence. It's just counterintuitive to grief is one of those things in life where you have to go through it to get through it. And that just is counterintuitive to how we face things sometimes. If every time um, someone drank alcohol or got drunk or used a drug, they had catastrophic results, a lot of people would stop sooner than they do. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes you have good moments. Sometimes you go to an all day concert, and sometimes you're out shooting pool with friends, and so it's like there were good times too. So you know I fell into that trap of thinking that numbing myself and running from the emotions was going to be the way to get through it. And a large part of that is I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel safe to talk about it. People around you are always like, hey, it's time to move on. Hey, you just need to get out there and start dating again. Or hey, you just need to do this. Or hey, it's like they were married 40 years. What do you think that it's that easy for them to just go dating again?
Yeah.
Insert whatever example, but it's like grief is a very personalized journey. It's an individualized thing, and no two people's journey are exactly the same. So it's like sometimes we don't feel safe enough to grieve. But also mixed into that was, trauma and PTSD and clinical depression. And it's like it's really easy for people to be like, well, just go do this. It's like I don't feel like doing anything. It's like having a color TV your whole life, and then someone goes, all right, hold on, here, same size TV, but you get a black and white TV now. It's just not the same. For people
Yeah.
that used to have a black and white TV to go to color TV, it's an upgrade. They may still watch the black and white for nostalgia, but it's like it's the best way I can like. It's like the salt left the food, so to speak. It's just
But but I mean, everybody struggles with that as far as like being on, like when talking to people that have lost someone, it's like you want to encourage them and be supportive and stuff and try to do what you can to get them out of this funk.
yeah,
Not that you're discounting what they're going through, but just to refocus their energies and thoughts onto something else. So how do you, I mean, how do you accomplish that without having the
So
same
really
effect
good
that
question.
that girlfriend had on you, what she said.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just completely
Yeah.
off the chain, but
I share my story pretty often, so I think about that pretty often, and I've extended grace and forgiveness in my heart. But it's like, whoo! I also left that. I'll tell you what I did. Let me start there. I
okay.
stopped. I stopped crying for 12 years, and it really became when the substance abuse became prolific in my journey. Because now that I was trying to stuff those emotions and ignore them, I turned to ways that helped me do that. That's not to blame her. It's to say that, like, it was very damaging to me, and I didn't cry for 12 years. I'm certain of it. I know when I started crying again and what that process looked like, and it was a journey. But people mean well. See,
Sure
that's
they
the
do.
problem. Is I don't think most people are doing this to hurt people. I don't think
Hmm.
that is really it. I don't think she intended to hurt me. She had her own. Maybe she was tired. Maybe it was like I don't want to speak to that, but I know that for most people, we want to fix, we want to help, we want to take that off of you, and there's just some things that you can't take off of other people. So they don't need you to do anything other than be with them and be present with them.
Hmm.
So it's like you invite them to things, you check on them. So one of the common things in at least in Western culture would be to, like, people bring food trains, set up a food train after someone dies,
Hmm.
bring food to the funeral home. It's like people aren't really thinking about taking care of themselves. Um, you stop by, you sit on the porch with them, you chat on the phone, you text them. Maybe they don't want to answer the door, you can't make them. Really, it's about being consistent and just trying to make sure they know they don't have to do this alone. It's probably the healthiest piece of advice I could offer. It'll clearly look different in every scenario. Some people,
Sure.
yes, yes, I want to get out of the house, thank you. Other people are not going to be ready to leave for a year, 2 years. And as I always tell clients that are grieving, as long as you're not hurting yourself, no one gets to tell you what your grief journey looks like. No one gets to tell you you're done mourning, it's over, stop doing this, don't do it that way. Advice is not helpful when it comes to grief. I've found in life, advice is rarely helpful unless someone asks for it. Because there's kind of this presumption that, like, oh, I know what's wrong with your life and how to fix it, and yet their life is a train wreck. And it's like, I'll speak for myself. It's like, maybe I should be giving advice. So even professionally, I I'm a trained therapist. I guess so sometimes it's well, I'm a licensed counselor now, a clinical alcohol and drug counselor. I'm a trained therapist, used to be a psychologist. So it's like, what does all that mean? Well, the quick and dirty explanation I would give is that, like, a therapist is a tour guide. They're there to help you look within and find introspect and navigate that. A
Mhm.
counselor does the same thing, but sometimes they also roll their sleeves up and counsel. Sometimes they get into more practical mindfulness or grounding stuff. Doesn't mean therapists don't do those things, but it just, at least in my professional realm, it is a little more hands on and direct. So, you know, I still think that unless someone asks specifically about something for advice, a lot of times it's not really wanted or needed or helpful. It's more about just expressing to them that they matter, that I don't know what to say. So you just tell them that I don't know what to say. I just had you on my heart. I
Yeah.
just, sometimes people even offer things like, I mentioned my faith, right? I was angry at God. Where are you? You owe me. You know
Hmm.
what I think now? I'm so grateful I had those 6 years. I am so grateful that the only memories of my father are not all the bad ones. I couldn't see it at that time. I was too consumed with my own grief and pain. And I
That's
think that's just
understandable.
true. I think that's just true for anybody that's grieving, is we have to find our way through it.
Hmm.
Um, and I did not do a great job at that. It was just a train wreck. I had already survived so many things in my life growing up. It was like, maybe I just gave up. Maybe that's what it was. It was just really a perfect storm in my life that just wow, that culminated on a concrete floor and accepting that this was all my doing and eventually going into this other church service and this second pastor in a different facility months apart is preaching out of Matthew 7 about taking the plank out of your eye and forgiveness. And I'm like, what's going on? My mother was just telling me to forgive myself. And then I come and it just it went from there. It went from there.
Do you ever think back to and give credit to God for, I mean, all this time that you were searching for him, where's he at? And when all this stuff is going on, that he got you arrested so that you had to go through this and all of that would stop and put you on a different trajectory?
That is a daily acknowledgement of mine. What I would tell people is if you dare God to reveal himself, you need to buckle up and prepare for that ride.
Mm-hmm.
I prayed for it. I asked for it. Does that mean that God started tinkering around doing things in my life, so to speak? I did it. I did those things. However, I don't believe in randomness. I believe that things are ordained. I think that things do happen for a reason sometimes.
Yep.
And I absolutely believe that I would have never came to faith and learned to trust and know a creator had that not happened. I know it. So the worst thing that ever happened in my life led to the greatest thing that ever happened in my life, which is eternity and salvation, which also includes I ended up with custody of those two sons eventually. I ended up remarried with three more children. My family was grown. Like my career was restored after a decade of feeling like post release. I was only incarcerated 90 days. I was only there on a 5-year sentence, 90 days. I was granted what's called shock probation and given an opportunity. Basically, my judge wanted me to get a taste of what my life would look like if I didn't straighten up.
Mm.
And I made the most out of it. It wasn't always easy. A lot of times when you're doing the right thing every day, doing the right thing, and you can't get a decent job and you got to work terrible jobs, it's just like, what's the point of all this? But a lot of things happened in that time frame. Growing my family restoration, continued healing. I got called into ministry, and then ended up, my adult sons are both, they have their own mental health issues, and my oldest one, I share guardianship of him. He will always need caregiving. I had to be appointed that by a judge in a family courtroom where I was obliterated by a prosecutor for my history. They were like, you're a terrible person, and read me the riot act for 10 or 15 minutes about my history. And I just had to stand there and take it. And I remember that judge. And you have to understand, my son was in active addiction. I'm not going to tell his story, but there was a lot going on. And it took a few years of me out there searching for him on the streets and motels and getting mental inquest warrants for this to all get to this point. And the judge asked me, like, hey, that was a lot. Would you like to respond? And I just, the only thing that I could tell him was, I did all that. It's all true. It's also been over 10 years and I don't live there anymore. You don't know me. Let me reintroduce myself. And I just offered him the perspective that the only reason we're standing here for this young man is because of me. So decide what you need to. That's your right. But you can't stop me from being his father any more than you can alter my parental role with the other four children. I
Mm-hmm.
am his father. And they saw things my way. But it was the first time I'd been vindicated or experienced redemption in my story. And it was powerful.
Yeah.
But I
It's
get to share that regularly now. I get to share that with other incarcerated men because I run a substance abuse program inside of a Department of Corrections contracted facility.
mm-hmm.
So not only was my career restored, I was even afforded the opportunity to go back into an environment where you just can't work in that environment with a record. And it's like, I remember not giving my notice until they gave me security clearance. It's like, it's not going to happen. There's no way they're going to hire me. Or I'm sorry, not hire me, but clear me.
Yeah.
it did happen. And it's just, yes, I do think all that happened for a reason. And I used to say a long time ago, like, I don't know why I'm alive. I should have overdosed and died. Why was I spared and not all these other people out here that have overdosed in the years?
Because you
Um,
still have purpose here.
that is 100% right.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that a little bit since this is we made it a point to get this interview in during Men's Mental Health Month, and you kind of when I was talking about that, you commented that maybe that is the real conversation, what men carry and how complicated it is for you to balance.
Yeah.
So do you want to kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. Um, and it might be hard for some people to hear. Okay, I just want to preface that it's not an it's first of all, I can't see anybody other than you, so I'm not speaking to anybody directly. I often tell my men, if I say something and it stings a little bit, you should take a look at that. I don't know what it's about, but maybe take a look at that. Right? It
Mhm.
could be false guilt. It also could be something that there's a thing to. But from the time men are babies, we are told to stop crying. Our own mothers tell us to quit being a sissy, to quit being a little girl, to grow up, to rub some dirt on it, to put some duct tape on it and keep going, to man up. And that's not including what the men in our life say to us to try to toughen us up. So then what did we just internalize? Well, I'm not allowed to be vulnerable. I'm not allowed to cry. I'm not allowed to have negative emotions. We get programmed in society, men do, I think. And this, listen, I can't speak to the life of a woman or any other circles, right? I can only speak
Mhm.
for my own. But like for men, it's like, what inherent value do we have? What are we taught when the boat's going down? Women and children first. I'd argue if there were dogs on the boat, they get off third. Then the men can get off. I'm not saying we should do it any other way. I'm just saying as a point, I think societally we teach men you're there to provide, put a roof over everyone's head, screw what you're carrying, suck it up, buttercup. This is what being a man looks like. And I don't think that's accurate or correct. I think we set a lot of men up for failure that way. And that's not all men and it's not all families at all.
Right.
Um, I know some well adjusted men that had loving homes. I had loving support inside that dysfunctional family of mine. So it's not to put all the blame elsewhere, but it's what I see, it's what I've lived and experienced too. And so what does that culminate in? Oh, 50-year-old men that can't communicate anything other than rage. They can't tell you that you hurt their feelings or they felt disrespected. So they just stop talking to you and give you the cold shoulder for 3 weeks, or they go sit in the garage and drink themselves to death and avoid everything, or they just keep working, working, working until they drop dead of a heart attack at 55 because they don't know how to deal with what's going on inside and they don't know how to be vulnerable. And good luck convincing that man that he needs
Mhm.
other safe men to be able to do that because he don't want to hear that either. That sounds risky as all get out. I had mentioned that I didn't cry for 12 years, and I know exactly when it was. I know how long it was because I wandered into a men's ministry retreat in 2018, October of 2018 to be exact. And it was the first time I'd ever experienced safe men. I
Mhm.
had a loving grandfather who raised me just like a kid, and he was in some ways safe, but in other ways, he was a man's man. He was a truck driver. I had a lot of uncles, um, but in our family, the way you show love is to bully one another, to lightweight bully one another. Nobody else is allowed to do it, but that's what we do to one another to show affection. And it's just like, I don't know, this hurts. I don't like that you're doing that to me. And like, that wasn't them being cruel or mean. It's just what they were shown and modeled.
Right.
So I wander in there and I saw other men doing their work, putting skin in the game. They didn't ask me to do anything they didn't do first and risk it and model it for me. And it was like, I don't want to do this. This is weird and awkward, and I'm not doing it. Okay, I'm doing it. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm doing this. And the relief that I felt and what I took away from that, I'm still a part of that ministry. I staff it 2 to 3, 4 times a year. I pay to staff. I pay to go back and help other men be afforded that experience. But also, it's continued my own work. These are my friends,
Mm.
and they live all over the country. And there are men all over this country that will answer the phone when I need it. They get in a car and drive for me, and I'll get in a car and drive for them. But I don't think that's a common experience for a lot of men. We don't have a lot of other safe men. You might have some buddies that'll drink some beers with you and talk about the missus pretty bad if you need to, or they might, I'm not saying that men don't have close buddies and friends and all that, but I think that emotionally we're so stunted sometimes because we're not taught that we're allowed to or able. Real men don't cry is the sentiment I hear often from the
Mm-hmm.
offenders, the inmates that I work with. And it's like, so let me ask you this, if you believe that, why do you have the ability to cry? Why would you be designed biologically to cry? Well, I've never got an answer for that. A lot of excuses and things like that, but never like, oh, I think it's because of this. So then the next thing that I usually present them with is some psychoeducation that when we cry, there are chemicals that our brain releases that soothe us.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone that's had a long drawn out cry, I'm talking snot, an ugly cry, snot bubbles. I bet you took a real good nap after. I bet you slept through the night after that, maybe, because it's so exhausting, it's so cathartic. And then those neurochemicals in our brain just do what they were designed to do. And it's like, I should do this every day. I cry all the time now. I've almost cried twice in this interview, and we really haven't gotten anything heavy. That I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it's perfectly natural, and it just means that I feel emotions and I have a heart and I have lived a life. And but I also think I'm a bit of an anomaly and have dedicated my life to a healing journey. It's taken me many years to get here. It's taken many different treatment modalities, antidepressants, psychiatry, therapy, self-help, ministry, meditation, somatic work, like the list goes on and on. And I've sometimes apologized for that. Like, well, man, I wish I knew the one way. I knew maybe, what if it had happened sooner? What if everything happens for a reason? But I mentioned that I feel a core identity of mine is a healer. And I read somewhere once that for the healer, first comes the suffering, then
Mm-hmm.
they come back with the medicine for other people. And
Yep.
it's like, oh, inside of some faith groups and circles, it's particularly a Catholic term. It's not official dogma, so for the resident Catholics in the room, don't hang me dry here. But there's this concept or idea of a victim soul, and what that means is it's a voluntary posture, surrender to God that you will suffer well for him and for the sins of others, so to speak. So not so much as like penance for other people's sins, but it's like I believe I've been called to divine humility to model for people that it's okay to be screwed up, it's okay to be broken. Mental health is still so taboo.
Mm-hmm.
People don't talk about it. Oh, I don't want anybody to know I'm bipolar, and it's like you didn't ask for it. It's just a
Right.
chemical balance. That's all that it is. And it's like, so we spend
And
so
you
much
can't
time.
help it.
You can't help it. It also doesn't mean that you can't have a normal life. What does normal mean? Sure, that for some people it is debilitating. For some people it eliminates certain opportunities in life, but lots of things do that. Diabetes does that.
Mm-hmm.
Different medical illnesses. So it's like, why is mental health and addiction still such a stigmatized subject? We spend so much time trying to hide those dirty secrets in our family, quote unquote, right? Like, I don't
Right.
think they're dirty secrets. It's ironic to me. I don't know anyone that hasn't been impacted by substance use. Even if you don't have it yourself, or an immediate family member, someone in your family did, or your community does, or in the world post opioid epidemic, someone that's lost someone to a fentanyl overdose. So, like, let's be honest. Shouldn't we be talking about this stuff?
Absolutely. And
That's
suicide is the same way. It's very rare to come across someone that doesn't know someone that
that's
or
right.
have lost someone.
And I appreciate the reminder. So I'm licensed to teach something called QPR, which
Mm-hmm.
stands for question, persuade, and refer. And one of the parts of that education is to dispel myths about suicide.
Yeah.
And most people will be surprised that the things they've heard about it are just not true. Like, oh, people that talk about doing it won't do it. What? Oh, they're just trying to get attention. Or if you bring it up, you'll plant the thought. No, no. Or um, my mind went blank on me because I started to think of another aspect of that, in that, like, when you ask someone if they're considering harming themselves that way, you can't ask them if they're thinking of hurting themselves, because to a person that is suicidal, they don't view it as hurting themselves. It's a means to an end. It's about stopping the hurt. So in the language builds in an ability to, nope, to deny that question. You want to be direct with someone, like, have you thought about killing yourself? Are you
Mhm.
thinking about ending your life? And just be direct. But again, then come the myths of, like, you don't want to ask them that because if they weren't thinking about it, now you planted that thought. Or again, like, people that talk about it don't want to do it. Or, and the reality is this: people that make that decision actually feel like they have tried to cry out. They feel like no one cares. They feel like, so that's not true. They just need to know that it would matter. It would, that's what they need to hear. They also
Mhm.
need help. They're struggling. So it's, not to oversimplify a very complicated subject, but again, you're right. It's just like the mental health. It's just like addiction. It's like people are suffering in silence and falling through the cracks, and lives are being cut short. Um, I've done a
Mhm.
lot of funerals as a pastor, and primarily that's just as a volunteer in my community, and they've almost all been suicides and overdoses. These are unplanned deaths where families are scrambling to figure it out. They don't have life insurance a lot of times. It was an unplanned thing, no formal plan. And what people don't know is that a funeral home will contract with a pastor. It's not free. You pay for
Mhm.
it. They just don't tell you. They roll it into the cost.
Right.
Well, that's $300 that you probably need yourself. Let me just take that off your plate. The other thing is, a contract pastor. I've met some wonderful contract pastors doing services. Um, I've experienced some walk in, say a prayer, and leave, and it's like, oh, no, 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 that was someone's kid, that was someone's father, someone's spouse. They deserve more than this.
Yeah.
I don't have the authority to preach anybody into heaven or hell. This is about the grieving process. This is about honoring their life. And used to, and I, and therein it lies some of that irony, right? Like, I have PTSD. I'm afraid of dead bodies. I'm
Mm.
afraid of death. And when I was called into ministry and called to go do funerals, it was like, I can't, I can't, I can't, I can't. And I could spend an hour walking you through what that internal conversation with God went like. So how is it physically possible that I've done this? I'll tell you, I'm not doing it. I'm being obedient, and I'm responding to a call. But that's what it means in the book of Philippians to say that I can accomplish all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens me. It's not me, it's the Holy Spirit. I'm just a vessel. And I've had some sobering reminders at times where I went somewhere and it was a little bit more of a personal loss, and I didn't have that same mantle, and I was impacted more by
Mhm.
that experience. Maybe not to the point of a nightmare or any of that, but it's like, okay. So for me, like, that, the things that I've been through, to go back to, that earlier observation and question of yours of, like, maybe God did answer your prayers, and maybe he did spare you from this for a reason. It's absolutely it. He
Mhm.
had purpose for my pain and suffering, and it was to help other people find. See, it takes survivors to go back for people. I don't know your story in completion, but you must be a survivor to be doing this. That's the reality that I know, because the only people that know their way back into the dark are those that have escaped it. And therefore, that's the only people that can go back for others. When I look at it that way, it is more, and I don't mean to put undue responsibility on anyone, but it's like, I don't feel that my life belongs to me anymore. It is my responsibility at this point because I was spared and given a second chance and a purpose to go back and help other people. If I was going down a river in a canoe and the river dog legs right, and as soon as it does, which means you can't see around the bend, and as soon as you go around, it picks up. I mean, I gotta paddle my butt off to get to shore because there's a waterfall 200 yards ahead. And I get out and I offload my boat and I'm carrying it back to where we dropped in at. And I see some other people just strolling down the river, clueless of what's up ahead. Am I going to be quiet or am I going to let them know? Am I going to share what I know? I think I'll share what I know. I can't make people listen. I can't make anyone's journey my own, but I do believe that we need conversations about these things because right now, in theory, some time from now, when someone is hearing this, there are people that are in the dark right now. They are
Absolutely.
clinging for something, just anything to go another hour, another day, another minute at times. And early in my recovery journey, I would get angry at an NA meeting. I would talk to my sponsor and I'm like, I'm so upset. I'm tired of y'all talking about just for today, just for today. This is my fourth meeting today. I'm just trying to get through lunch. I'm just trying to make it through dinner time so I don't get high again. And it helped me realize that we're all just at different places on the journey, and our journeys may not look identical, but none of us are exempt. We're all going to suffer. We're going to go through some challenging things. And it does not mean that all of our lives are equal and that some people don't suffer more than others. Not at all. But I also know how bleak and hopeless it can get when we're suffering. And therefore, we really need people to talk about escaping that, surviving that, and that there can be life on the other side of it. Because I don't experience a lot of joy in my life. I'm not going to lie, I don't. But I also think joy and happiness are two different things.
I would
There's a
agree
lot
with
of,
that. I
there's
don't
a lot
like to
of,
hear that you don't experience joy.
well, I'm going to tell you where I experience it. So it's not that I don't. Happiness, I experience a great deal of. There are lots of things that make me happy. Sometimes it's a soft drink, sometimes it's food, sometimes it's a TV show, but joy is something deeper, more meaningful. And by and large, those moments come from my children. And it's usually in a moment where I see that joy is about to make me cry because I see evidence of the work that I've done to ensure my kids don't experience or haven't experienced the same things as me, and seeing that in fruition of some sort, or realize, whereas maybe at another stage, I'm like, this kid is clueless about the real world. You know what? He's 10, and I'm so glad he doesn't know about the things I had to know about at 10 years old. Like, are you kidding me? That brings me joy.
That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
And
So,
doing funerals for
go ahead.
families brings me joy.
And what?
Doing funerals for families, serving people that are suffering brings me deep, meaningful joy. While it may not be on my face, it's purpose. And I never feel like I didn't get the better end of the deal because I don't think I'm doing anything other than showing up. And I always end up a little bit with a little bit more healing myself, where it's like, that's why my aunt always acted like that. You know, you go to a funeral, you're going to see some family stuff play out. So sometimes my role as the pastor of that service is to keep the peace and to make sure that we got code words with the funeral director and make sure nobody gets punched.
Yeah.
But it gives me my own healing perspective in my own life and family of like, yeah, you know what? Two things can be true at the same time. My grandmother was a loving presence in my life, and she was also a mean German woman. And she said some things that I still hear negative messages from, but both of those can be true. They don't have to define every moment of my life. But um,
Yeah, you
what
speak
I'll
of
add is
go.
that I have to, because the joy is, I don't want to cheat joy.
Yeah.
I am securing more and more joy in my life because I have amplified my own healing journey. It has to come from within and not
Mhm.
from necessarily external things. So even seeing those things in my kids, it's amplifying something from within of like, I've fought tooth and nail to get healthier for them. They deserve better. So I'm to see that is validation and confirmation. So I don't want to be discouraging to anyone that's like, what's the point? This guy even said you're not going to have a lot of joy. I think all our journeys can look different, but I also know that the more I dedicate my life to being present with my own stuff and
Mhm.
prioritizing my own self-care, I experience more and more joy as life goes on. I'm looking to finish well. That's what I'm interested in doing. I want to finish the race well. And that, you
Very
know,
well.
we all have to define what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it interesting that talk so much about the men that you serve and all of that, but don't you primarily have a female audience? Or did I
Nope, that's
misread
true.
that?
So nope, that's
So
100% true.
why do you think
So
women are searching so much for those
I
conversations?
believe I have an answer. I can't swear to it because I can't speak for women. I've never
Sure.
directly asked um, followers and things like that. But what I've experienced is that as I've wrote a book and working towards publishing and all that, and realized the writing world doesn't quite work the way it does on TV, or maybe I thought it did. So yeah, I got some really good advice about like I have to help sell books. So the
Hmm.
encouragement was you got to build a platform. Okay, I'm not a, I'm a trained therapist. I'm a clinician. I'm not a social media content creator, but that like I've had to learn a lot about that and shift into that. So that gave me access to demographics.
Hmm.
Who is viewing my content? Who is following my stuff? I told all these publishers my target audience is men 18 to 45, maybe 50. It's not at all. It's women 45 to 55. Is demographically what's showing up, and it's like I have hard evidence of this, and it's a huge, it's 60 something percent of the people that are following and viewing my content or writing. And I asked myself that over and over and over again, and I think that the only logical conclusion is that that's who's dealing with us jacked up men,
Hmm.
wives and mothers and daughters who are trying to figure out why does he not talk to me? Why is he an island? Why won't he open up to me? What is it? What am I seeing? And they're trying to make sense. Maybe they're also looking for resources to offer the men in
Yeah.
their life. But I think primarily it's about seeking understanding because it reminded me of what I shared about. I got more from going to AA meetings with my father than going to an Alateen meeting and someone giving me a hug and telling me it's not my fault. I know it's not
Hmm.
my fault. I want to understand this because
Yeah, I would venture to say that you're probably spot on there.
I
So,
just think that like knowing myself, my own health and lack thereof in some areas, and then other men that I know, it's like, oh yeah, we're a whole thing to deal with. And
hmm.
it's like, what is making you tick? What is this about? And I think that's where it drives from.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about safety for a minute. You commented that sometimes you can't hear messages unless you feel safe. What makes us feel safe enough to tell the truth?
So there's probably a lot of answers to this, but to simplify it, and I'm just going to borrow from that men's ministry that I'm a part of, where I've said that I experienced safety for the first time, at least safe men, and we are intentionally safe. We prioritize safety, so we do it in a lot of different ways. We model for the men that attend. I'm not going to ask you to do something. You're like, that's not how this
Hmm.
works. I'll jump off the cliff first, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But we also set ground rules like confidentiality. Who wants to open up to someone when you're a gossiper and you're the family business now, so to speak? So being able to trust that what I share with you won't be used against me later as a weapon because you're fighting with me. Um, one of the things that I've experienced in life, and I've many men, I believe, but all like I think that we hear, oh, we want you to be this way, but really, I think what's been shown to men is a lot of times their family would rather them die up on that horse than lay down on their shield. And maybe that is some stigmatization that we carry, but I think that that has been communicated on some level. So it's like, how can we be vulnerable if we think you're going to use it against us later in a fight or an argument, or if it's going to be gossiped about? So confidentiality is a huge thing.
I could see
um
that. So how can we become a safer person for someone who's struggling?
your own health. It's hard to be something for someone you're not for yourself is one area. We got to do our own work, but also I'm better at doing for other people than myself, so that doesn't
Mm,
hold complete water either. So I think that again it goes back to being present with people, and this is again to speak to safety as well, so it answers both of those questions. Did they ask for advice? What makes you the expert on what's going to work for them? Like, and hey, listen, maybe they need to hear that advice. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes we do need to start leaving breadcrumbs for people, but it's
mhm.
easier for people to eat that and follow those breadcrumbs the same way it's easier with if someone's struggling with faith and you're like, you're going to burn in hell for that if you don't change your mind. Whoa. Instead of, let them wrestle with it. Let hear them out. What Witness them. Let them share what's coming up for them instead of jumping straight to, I know the way for you. I know the way for you. You don't think I've I my mother tells me this to this
Mhm.
day, and I still have the same reaction where it's like, Richard, you're gonna have to turn that over to God. And every time, what I want to say is, "Oh, gee, you don't think I've thought of that? You don't think I do that all day? You don't think I have to rinse, wash, and repeat?" Because it is somewhat of an oversimplification of like, yes, I know that, and at this point in my life and walk, I do that and prioritize that. But I'm also just a human being. I'm just a
Mhm.
mortal man and I'm broken. And sometimes I pick it back up and stress, worry, fear, all those things creep in. So to create safety for others, we kind of need to be doing our own work and be present with people, not offer don't be so quick to offer advice and thoughts about what they need to do. Someone venting about their marriage, I divorce them, you need to just go ahead and leave them and all that. And it's like, wow, you know, okay, maybe that's how you would handle it, but did you hear anything they said? They're hurting. Like, we need to honor their pain. Like, we need to honor whatever it is that they're sharing. Um, and I would use developmental psychology as my argument as to why. That is how people learn how to manage their emotions, is through modeling or lack thereof. So it with the little kid and they bump their toe, right? Now don't use me as an example because if I bump my little toe, everybody's
Mhm.
about to know. You'll think I've been shot. But they freak out, they're having the meltdown. Oh, and then you saw it, it wasn't that bad. But if you tell them to just quit crying and get over it, that's not how that works. And
Yeah.
you're actually going to stunt them and tell them that their feelings are. So you're, oh my goodness, you poor thing. It looks, oh, so terrible. They get tired of it pretty fast. You heard them, they felt seen, and oh, squirrel, and they move on. Not to oversimplify an adult's emotions or an older individual or child's emotions, but like even with the deeper stuff, it does become easier for people to surrender it and let go once they feel heard and seen. It's like it's because it's like, do you see what's happening to me? Do you see this? But when you don't feel seen, you just keep telling everyone about it, and so for some families and some circles, it's like, oh, they're so negative. All they want to do is wallow, and it's like, have we asked ourselves, like maybe it's because they haven't felt validated yet or seen? Now, sometimes we do need to encourage people to push through and move on. But safety is something you create. It's just like the safety gear on your car. You got to do maintenance on it. You've got to be intentional about it. Otherwise, when you need the brakes, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
So for humans, we need to be intentional with one another to create that safety. Maybe even reminding people like, hey, this stays between us, whatever's going on, you know. Um, I have a complicated role with the counselors that I train, and I have to sometimes differentiate with them. Like, I'm not here to be your therapist, but I also can't help you if I don't know what's going on. And one of the things that you need to understand is I'm a tenured clinician. I know how to carry a lot in my life and continue to be an effective. You're learning to do that. I don't know how to teach you to ride the bike if I don't know what it is you're carrying, just know the limits of this and that and the other. But like in that, I build some safety of like, hey, you can talk to me to whatever degree you're comfortable. Let's walk this together. And some of them are like, okay, and they keep it moving. And then others, they press into their work a little bit and they're like, I got this going on. And I needed to know that because, okay, you know what? Actually, you need to take the rest of the day off. Let us cover the rest of your caseload. You don't need to be, you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
That's what takes. Sometimes we need permission to take care of ourselves, and that is a wonderful thing we can do for another person. Is just give them permission to fall apart. Give them permission to remember it's okay to fall apart or to take care of themselves. You know what? If you don't want to go to your mother's house because she violates your boundaries, then you don't have to, and they need to hear that. Or
It's very true.
to remind them to eat. Have you showered? Have you done these things? If it's like acute grief and you're not taking care of yourself well, or even mental health for that matter, but
Mm-hmm.
or active addiction actually. So like that's one of the things that falls to the wayside is self care, hygiene. So I think there's a lot of ways that safety can be implemented, and those are kind of the core ways that come to mind for me right now. But
Yeah. Given the permission is a huge thing, not just to yourself, but like as you said, to express that to others. Sometimes it's a relief for them to feel validated that way. So, so looking back, what did your own suffering teach you that no textbook ever could?
you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it.
You can't avoid the suffering.
You can't avoid suffering in this lifetime. We are not in control of a lot of things that we think we're in control of. And I, some of that is for me to hear a reminder to myself. I have control issues. I lacked a lot of control in my childhood, so I love to try to have control. I have a career where I have the keys to the building and but I also went from the keys to the jail to being in the jail. So like I've seen that dichotomy, and the trying to avoid suffering. My grief was suffering. The trauma was suffering. It's like you can't avoid it. Grief demands to be heard. It will. So I liken it to a boogie board, a wakeboard. Those little
Mm-hmm.
miniature surfboards. They probably
Yeah.
weigh like 5 or 6 ounces. It's styrofoam, but they're
Right.
very buoyant. You can weigh 200 pounds and try to stand on it and pin it to the bottom of a pool, and you will struggle to do that because of the buoyancy. So let's just imagine that the water is the surface and you're trying to keep your grief under the surface and just pretend like it ain't real, and you're holding on to it, and you get distracted and you loosen your grip just a slight bit. What happens? Well, it
Flips
comes
up.
up out like a rocket. It hits little Larry in the neck. It flings out of the pool, busts you in the chin. That's what happens when we try to suppress things. They're going to come out sideways. So one of the things that I just, you know, you can't stop things from happening in life. Your spouse may divorce you. They may cheat on you. You may lose a close family member to a drunk driver. It's a normal day until it isn't anymore. And all the people I've worked with over the years dealing with grief, like those are the moments burned in, even in my own, in this suicide story, like the key events involve some like very vivid memories because it was a normal day until it wasn't. And we those get etched in the brain, and that will just get way too technical in talking about how trauma is stored in the brain. But there's a particular PTSD is a memory issue, is what's going on. The functional parts of the brain, they all do different things. Things get stored in the wrong places because of trauma, and grief can be trauma, can be traumatic. But so yeah, you can't live your life trying to not get hurt. You have to live your life because it might be over at any time. You have to live your life because you get one shot at this. And that is an oversimplification, especially for anyone that's grieving, going through depression, battling ongoing chronic health issues, mental, physical, spiritual. Like, it's easier said than done, but also speaks to why it's so important that you really need to push back. You got to fight back. You need people in your corner they're willing to sit down with you when it's time to sit down, that'll stand up and offer you a hand when it's time to finally stand up, that'll come back with a flashlight to lead you out of the dark, whatever that looks like. You need some people in your corner. It's actually kind of my own personal motto and claim to fame is to lean on your people. Like, this is not an individual sport. We are hurt in relationship and we heal in relationship. You would be hard pressed to come up with an example of a wound that doesn't involve another human being. Therefore, healing without the help or the surrogacy or the safety of another human being is going to be difficult, because otherwise it stays in here.
But there's also people that do everything they can to push others away and not not hear all of those things, and that they are loved and accepted. And
And it is very
how do you
painful.
battle that? Or not battle it, but I mean, how do you go up against it and
No, it's
convince them otherwise?
a really valid question. So a good example of people that are dealing with that would be people that have loved ones in active addiction. Um, you're grieving someone while they're still alive. You're watching them actively kill themselves, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and or at least stepping towards that. And at any moment, that phone call is going to happen, or whatever, and then you have to start setting boundaries because they're stealing or this. And I've worked with a lot of parents that grieve the loss of a child that overdosed, and all of them carry this false guilt of, like, if maybe I shouldn't have kicked him out of the house, they'd still be alive, or I shouldn't, if I'd only done this or done better. And it's so complicated because you can't tell that parent that they can't, that's just not, but I can't make anybody do anything. I can't even make my kids pick their toys up, and I have the authority to ground them. Okay. So, like, I have to remind myself sometimes and remind other people, like, you're only responsible for you. So I'm
Yeah.
responsible for how I deliver a message to you. The tact, timing, delivery are all my responsibility. How you receive that and what happens with it, or the ignoring it or resistance to it, that's not about me. However, it's a delicate balance, because I work with a population of people that are struggling with addiction, struggling with trauma. And by the way, let's just clear the air here. No one woke up in fifth grade and wrote a book report on being an IV heroin user. No one said, I think this is what I want to be when I grow up. Something happened. I don't
Yeah.
know what it was for everyone, but it's either trauma, grief, mental illness, mental health issues, self medication. Something has happened to them. But I remind these men, you're not 8 anymore. Now you're 45, and it's your responsibility to do something. You're re-victimizing your family, your parents, your children. You have an
Yeah.
obligation and responsibility to do that. And they're highly resistant. They're basically ordered to be in treatment. They don't want to be always. Some of them are ready, but a lot of them aren't. So my counselor sometimes will be like, we're just wasting our time with him. He doesn't, clearly he doesn't want to change. And it's like, I agree. I don't think he wants to yet. But
Mm-hmm.
guess what? Here's my question. How many people have given up on him in his life? He might expect it. He might be trying to push us away. I'm not saying it's healthy or normal, but to retort what we're seeing, and I'm talking from a professional standpoint, which changes things when it's a personal, private
Yeah.
relationship. But it still holds the same sentiment of, like, consistently showing up for somebody. You never know when that moment's going to happen. When you're just That guy didn't write that sermon for me. That pastor didn't write that other sermon for me. They were following what they were feeling called to do in that moment. The rest was between me and God. But they're consistently showing up week in and week out. You know how many men probably weren't successful and didn't really come to faith and didn't change their lives? Probably a lot more. Actually, I know it's a lot more than the government reports. You know, it's one of my arguments is that if we don't know the real numbers, we don't know what works and what doesn't work. And arguably, the recidivism numbers are not accurate. They report them to be very, a lot lower than I think they really are. I see
Mm-hmm.
these men over and over again, and I'm like, it's so much worse than we ever realized. And I think that's because people are very complicated. There's a million
Yeah.
reasons why we turn out the reason we do. It's not one thing often. It wasn't that one single act that my father, committed. It just wasn't. It was a culmination of a lot of things.
Right.
And some of them were my own responsibility to be dealing with. So, you know, it's hard. It's so easy to say you just got to show up for people and be consistent, but the practical side of that is like you also have a right to set boundaries to protect your own energy. And I think it's a very delicate
Very much
balance
so.
of what it looks like. And I
Very
would add
much.
one more caveat.
Mm-hmm.
Never underestimate the power of intercession prayers. Never underestimate the power. My mother prayed for Jesus to straighten stuff out in my life. I didn't want to hear it. I told her to go on somewhere with it.
Yeah.
Matter what I wanted. And again, I also want to acknowledge this. My faith is about me. So, the people can feel and have their own world beliefs, and I respect that. And by no means do I ever mean to dump religion. I'm kind of anti-religion. I don't mean to dump faith down people's throat ever, but it is such a huge part of my own recovery and story. I would not be doing anyone a favor by not being honest about what helped save my life.
Sure.
Or that I've seen it be successful in other people's lives. I just don't want to discredit anyone that is trying and seeking and fighting back, or to tell anyone, don't dismiss your own kid or family member or loved one because they don't believe and you do, and you think that's the only way it can look. Just don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't give up on them.
Good advice. All right, we're going to switch gears here for a minute, play a little round of rapid fire.
All right.
So, give me the first thing that comes to mind here. What gives you hope?
My children.
What's one thing people misunderstand about addiction?
Mm. It's not just a choice. It's not simply a choice.
What's one thing people misunderstand about grief?
Mm. Oh, well, that time heals all wounds. It does not.
What's one thing every man needs to hear today?
You are enough.
Finish this sentence. Strength is.
Mm. I know this was rapid fire, but that's a tough one because it's hard for me to not want to expound on that. That strength can be counterintuitive. I believe strength comes from vulnerability, not from muscles. Strength looks all kinds of ways. Maybe that's a cleaner way for me to say that. Strength looks all kind of ways.
Okay. And hope is.
You know, I don't have a profound way of saying this, but I read a quote quoting John Wayne, and it's probably not true, but that,
If the
bravery,
internet said it is.
that's right. It's got to be true. You know, courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about saddling up anyways. I would say that hope isn't, it's not that, it's not that difficult, but it is possible for things to get better. That's what hope is it's a belief and maybe even a feeling that, like, it's got to get better than this. It's got to get better than this. And there are days I still have road rage. I do. People can't drive, And I have to talk myself off the ledge daily and remind myself I hate jail food. And sometimes that is enough to give me hope that I'm not going to do anything. Oh,
I love that.
they saw me saying something to, no, I'm not talking to you. I'm singing to my radio, and I just keep it moving. I'm judging you, and I have thoughts, but it's not worth it. And I don't like jail food. So I'll behave. So, hope, man, that's how that's how I describe prison. It was the most hopeless experience of my life. So in my program, I explained to men what I've tried to create is maybe the first place that you can experience hope, maybe even the first time in your life. Doesn't mean that it's fun and awesome and the food's great, but that maybe, just maybe, I'm not the worst thing I've ever done. Maybe I'm not the worst things that have ever been done to me. Like, those are not identity characteristics. Those are things that you've been through. So hope is just this belief that it can be better, it can get better. Without hope is a very difficult existence.
Mm, very true. Very true. Well, Richard, thank you. Not only for sharing your professional knowledge, but for sharing your own story with such honesty. I think one of the biggest takeaways from today's conversation is that mental health isn't something we master once and move on
Mm.
from. It's something we continue tending to, and regardless of our title or training or how many people depend on us. I know this conversation is going to resonate with a lot of people, especially those who are used to being the helper. So thank you for trusting us. But before I let you go, where can listeners connect with you or follow the work that you're doing?
Social media. My my name is Richard Lynch. Obviously, it will be hard to find by just Googling. I'm not Googling, but that's when you ask me what kind of soft drink I want, and I say Coke. I'm from Kentucky. Everything's a Coke. Pepsi, Big Red, it's all Coke. So Facebook search Richard Lynch, you'll see this same hat. You'll see this same bearded man in that picture. On Instagram and TikTok, you can look up Lean on Your People
Okay.
or YouTube. You won't find anything on YouTube currently. I do have a channel though. But when you look up that hashtag, it will link you to things that I've been writing over the years and doing over the years. It was actually something that I inadvertently started, and a literary agent was like, "Keep doing that, so that you can build your brand and build your presence and platform." And
Mm-hmm.
then I don't really understand tech. I've gotten to that age where technology is kind of getting difficult for me, but it was like, oh my goodness, if I just type in that hashtag lean on your people, it takes me to all kinds of things that I've written or posted about over the years. So those are the core
Okay.
ways on those three platforms, or looking up that hashtag.
Okay. Sounds good. And we'll include that in the show notes and everything too. So, any final thoughts you want to add before?
No, I just kind
No.
of summed it up in that last little bit there. But you are not the worst thing you've ever done. None of us are. That's not who you are. No more than your identity is rooted in the worst thing you've been through. I talked about surviving things and being a survivor. Some people find validity in that, and that's okay if that's a part of your recovery journey and you're surviving. If that is what's giving you the strength, then don't let anybody take that from you. But I just want to offer that to people, where it's like, if you're an alcoholic, that's not the only thing about you. That's not who you are. That's a piece of you. If you're a
Mhm.
rape survivor, if you're bipolar, whatever you have suffered and been through, that's you're so much more than that. Sometimes we get trapped in our pain and suffering, and I just feel like that is because we just haven't found the right people to honor and validate that and witness it with us, so that we can release some of it. And I just think that that's what's going on. So if you find yourself in a dark place, struggling right now, don't give up. Don't give up. Every breath in your lungs is another yes. It is. Sometimes, like I said, it's simply just, I like food enough that I can use that as motivation to get through traffic or something.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's way more serious things in life that we need to survive and get through, but cling to whatever that is, whether it's your children, your hopes and dreams of yourself, or even just the belief that I deserve better. I deserve better than what I'm getting out of life.
Bingo.
Sometimes that that drive is enough to keep you. I'm going to show y'all that I can do this, or that my grandmother was 50 something years old when she went to college for the first time. She became a special needs teacher. She used to drive a tractor trailer with my grandfather. I didn't really grow up with a lot of excuses for the stuff that I experienced. It was like, she would shame me if I didn't, if I said I couldn't do something. So it's okay to take a deep breath. It's okay to sit still when you need to. You don't have to apologize for taking care of yourself, because self-care is not selfish.
Very wise words and good reminders. And something else to remember here, you don't have to have all the answers to make a difference. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply ask someone, how are you really?
That's right.
Until next time, keep sparking conversations, keep creating community, and keep igniting hope. Thank you for joining us on Glow for Hope. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, your mental wellness matters, and you are never alone. For more resources and support, visit glowforhopenfp.org. That's glowforhopenfp.org. Stay connected, stay hopeful, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep shining.
This podcast does not and is not intended to provide medical advice. The information presented on this podcast should not be interpreted or construed in any way as a replacement or substitution for medical advice. It is important that you discuss your condition, treatment options, or any questions that you may have with your doctor or healthcare provider.